My guest today was a special boat operator in the Navy who served the country for 16 years and is now an ICF certified transformational coach. Nate Reeve, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah. So let's jump in. Can you tell us like a little bit about your military background and how you got into the military and kind of what parts of the world you were in?
Absolutely. I was one of those that I was 20 years old when the towers went down. I had gotten lost in the workforce for a couple of years and then found myself in my first year of college. And I think I was about a month in when the towers went down. And I wasn't sure why I was at college. I was there. And I was majoring in music business. And I wasn't sure why I was doing that either. So when something so profound as the towers happened, it didn't take long for me to get bit by the patriotism bug. And in my spare time, I watched entirely too many war movies. And so I went down to the recruiter not long after, and it took me about, I guess, just not quite a year to get in, right? So apparently other people had the exact same idea, and it took them a little while to sort through all of that for me to get into the Navy, to finish my whole year of college and then get on that airplane, go to boot camp. So my reasoning was like many young men in their 20s at that time, went and joined up, and it was a wild ride. You know, I did the fleet first. I was a gunner's mate on a cruiser, right? It was the USS Anzio. I was there for just shy of 3 total years. Um, did some leadership stuff there. And the whole while I was trying to figure out how to get into special operations. And we were out to sea one day in the ship was out to sea doing some maneuvers. And I saw a special boat come up at faster than I've ever seen a boat go, and came up alongside and then like turned 90 degrees and kind of disappeared. And I knew from that moment I wanted to do that. And it took me probably 6 months to find out what it even was. And then I actually ended up having a friend that was a SWIC and served in the fleet with me. And we made friends, and he helped me prepare and do all of that. And so not quite 4 years into my Navy journey, I tried out for SWIC school, and that's the hard stuff, right? The push-ups in the sand and the cold water swims and the obstacle course. Very similar to SEAL training with a lot of differences, but if you were to watch a video of them side by side for a few minutes, it would look the same. Now, to give credence to them, theirs is longer, and there's some nuances to it, but very similar in its theory.
Got you. And can you tell me a little bit more? What is SWIC for the audience who doesn't know?
Yeah, it stands for Special Warfare Combatant Crewman. So what we do is insert extract of, let's call it, specialty forces. So I did missions with no, mostly SEALs, right? So our customers, in air quotes here, uh, were SEALs mostly. But I did do some missions with other government agencies, think three-letter agencies. I also did a mission with Delta Force. So we were mostly in the insert extract business, and we were kind of client agnostic, but those clients have to want to work at night, which was our specialty.
Got you. Got you. And what part of the world were you in mostly? Were you in any kind of wild places around the world, or where'd you spend most of your time?
Yeah, so believe it or not, my first combat experience was in the Philippines. In 2000, I can't even really remember now. Might have been 9 or 10. And there wasn't kind of a little more than a criminal group down there, but they were aligned with Al Qaeda, says our intelligence. So we did a few missions with partner force there, which is it's very common around the world for special operations forces to work as a partner in their own stuff, right? So we were enabling Filipino special operators to go in and affect their own national security and missions like that. So we actually inserted and extracted a Filipino special operations group, and in the meantime got into kind of a low level conflict for us, at least. For them, it was, they lost a couple of guys, and it was pretty powerful for them. But yeah, that was my first experience was in the Philippines as part of Operation Enduring Freedom and affecting Al Qaeda linked terror forces there.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And so you were in for 16 years. Can you tell me a little bit about like getting out of the military and then your kind of transition post-military?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I did after the Philippines, I think that might have been like, if that was 9 or 10, then I did another 8 years beyond that, most namely at Team Six. And so it was a pretty wild ride. And I started considering getting out in 2013. And I had started to get college degrees, right? And so as part of my spiritual journey, we'll talk about it all bases from coming from, let's call it, a lower middle class family on one side. I was with my father, and with my mother, we were squarely kind of just above the poverty line, and divorced parents. And so, you know, each one was a fine parent in their own way. But so I had a thing with, once I hit adulthood, proving that I'm good enough, right? Proving that I'm worth my salt as a man, if you will. And so I just kept ticking higher, right? When I was in the fleet, that wasn't enough. I wanted to go to special operations. I did. Then when I had made it to a boat team in Little Creek. It didn't take me long to get unsettled there and kind of push against the system, which is also part of my shtick, if you will. Pre-transformation was always being kind of like this justice, or, kind of pushing against the norm. And so I thought, well, this isn't tough enough, right? So it was plenty tough. And so I went to tried out for Green Team, which is the selection to get into SEAL Team 6 for boat operators. It's called Mobility Green Team, not to be confused with our SEAL brethren go through Assault Green Team. It's a different process. Same schoolhouse, same location, just very different in their methods. So I went through that, made it, operated for about 5 years, did some science and tech after my operational years as well. Um, as a technical expert trying to get good technology onto the battlefield. And then I did one more year of leadership in the selection and training cell. Think putting people through the push-ups in the sand and the difficult stuff to get selected there. I led that group for a short period before I embarked upon the world. So, you'll hear in the part where the transformation is concerned, if I wasn't getting selected to difficult things, and I was where it was about as difficult as it gets. I still got bored with that, pushed against the system, and started getting a bunch of college degrees in my spare time. So it was like I was never was good enough, no matter how hard things got, no matter how far I went into the system. There was just, I couldn't rest. And that was a big part of the last 3 years when I started my inner work journey in earnest.
Got you. And so you said you got a couple of degrees while you were still in the military?
Yeah, I got 3 college degrees. So when I started the Navy, I had been to school for one college school year. I think I had 27 credits. And so I served for a long time without even considering it. I was going to serve until they kicked me out, right? I was all in. I was going to be a Master Chief, an E9. I was going to go as high as you could, and they were going to throw me out. And that was good until I actually found out that I do have a good bit of intelligence. I had no clue. I got C's in high school, right? I graduated 16th out of 32, and I'd like to think that's the top half, you know? And I'm from a very small town in Nebraska. So my
Thir
graduation
32 people in your graduating class?
Yeah,
Wow.
which is great, right? Like the school didn't have air conditioning when I was there. So in the beginning of the summer, when we'd go back in August, if it got above 92, we got out of school for the day. And so it's like a little more, I joke, I didn't come from a one-room schoolhouse. It was a fine education. The teachers were wonderful, but it's just not the same experience that, some of these behemoth school systems, say in Texas, are like, right? So, I graduated average. I got C's in high school. And I got bit by the bug once I found out there was a degree program for special operators that some really awesome SEALs had put together, with Norwich University, which is a fine university in Vermont. In fact, it's like the Citadel, right? A private military university. In fact, it was the first, and like back in like 1830 something. It's been around a long time. It still is a military, private military school. But they adopted a 4-year degree program in 2011 that's geared to interest us, to help us get college degrees in something that we're already doing and therefore already interested in. So the program was called, Defense Analysis and Security Studies Defense Analysis, bachelor's degree. So I did that by via correspondence. It was an asynchronous deal, and I actually went and graduated there, which was super special because it's Vermont, in June. So the whole thing was like a Kincaid painting. It was amazing, and I got to feel part of something. I got to put on the cap and gown, and I got honors, so I got tassels. And at 32 years old, that was really special, right? Because I just thought that ship had sailed for me.
Mhm.
And in the meantime, I met a college professor there that ended up becoming a very dear mentor, and now pretty much a family member, named Cindy Levy. And a lot of us that got educated there call ourselves Cindy's boys because she just believed in us, and she helped a lot of us get into very, very good master's degrees on the backside of that. Some guys went to the Fletcher School, some guys went to Yale. And if Cindy Levy wrote us a letter, we were getting in it. I don't fully know the wasta that she had, but she worked some pretty serious magic channels to get us into some cool universities. But not before I got a master's at Norwich, in diplomacy, which I did most of my thesis on, kind of pure strategy stuff, think John Boyd maneuver warfare, but applied to the mixture of the State Department and Tier 1 special ops. So I don't know, it was a year and a half long, and I really got a knack for the analysis piece. And I did some cool stuff while I was still at the team, working on kind of a strategy for the area that I was deployed in. I did most of my writing on, which was Somalia, and I got to work in a strategy group, helping write a policy to right size our role there. And so, um, I did that right after graduating from that master's degree, which was 2014. And then I served just a little bit longer in an operational unit. And right as my operational time came to an end in the early part of 16, I got into, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, for one of their executive deliveries of an MBA. So I did the next 2 years, mostly in my home office, but I did do some fair amount of experience there on the campus as well, getting an MBA from 3 o'clock in the morning to 7 in the morning, right? Unless I was down in Chapel Hill for the weekend doing my immersion stuff. So I just got bit by this education bug, trying to like make up for lost time or something like that.
Mhm.
And so then I got another master's, as if I was going to breathe this big sigh of relief and realize, okay, I'm suddenly smart enough. And now I can let it go and continue to quietly serve. But that's not what happened.
So, wow. So you got two masters while you were still in the military.
Yeah, in fact, I had to take a test to get out of my first master's, my diplomacy master's. It's a composition test, right? Where they give you like a 4 line thing to write on, and you have to write for an hour on it, and you had to hit certain performance points of things you'd already studied. You couldn't like access any sources. So you do like pre-study for this thing. It was 4 hours long, 4 questions, an hour per question, except I was on a major objective. And so I had to get special permission all the way up to the dean to take this test late. And then I had to get special permission all the way up to the commander of the Joint Task Force that I was on, because they normally shut down all communications when you're on a major, like, national level mission. And so I took this test just a couple of days late, but I was only one of 4 people that were allowed to access the internet, because of secrecy purposes and things like that. So that was quite an experience. I had to have this poor officer, my officer at the time, sit with me for those 4 hours, watching me, right, as a proctor in this freezing fan room on this ship that we were on. It was really funny, but all went my way, and I graduated with that. But I went to great pains to get these education, and I'm very glad that I have them. But yeah, it seems like I'd lost focus on my job for a while. Anybody that was with me at the time, still
Yeah.
trying to like find something.
Can you share? So during the test, you were on like a mission. Can you share about that, or is that classified, or can you tell about that?
Sure, I mean, yeah, a lot of it is, right? But we were in my time in, I did never go to Iraq or Afghanistan. I never once set foot in either one of those places. I still haven't. So I'm not a like Iraq war veteran per se, but I did get into a number of skirmishes on, missions where we had a very distinct objective. So it might have been a capture kill mission. It might have been to affect certain infrastructures to lead to further development of whatever, right? But it was kind of the dirty deeds done at night thing that I did more than anything.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that particular one was capture kill.
Okay. Gotcha. Um, so you said that you're really happy about getting the degrees. How did they, can you tell a little bit like how they served you in your transition as you're kind of beginning to 2016 is when you got out? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so yeah, they've all served, and I have this conversation a lot with people, and they're like, should I get an MBA or not? I think that depends on your goal. And at the time, my goal was to still prove that I'm really smart and go to one of the better schools that has an MBA, which I accomplished. At the time, it was like 16th on US News and World Report's ranking list, which mattered to me at the time. I would say now depends on the game you want to play. If you want to be an entrepreneur and you don't yet know business, maybe an MBA is for you, but a very particular one delivered at a very particular school. If you want to go work for a big company, MBA is a good idea. If you want to go work for a very small company, I'm not sure that it is. So it really depends on the goal that you want. And so I got out in 18, and so I don't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to make as much money and have as much influence as I could. That's all I really knew. And I didn't mean it in this like evil way, but it was self-serving to the best of my knowledge. I thought that at the time, a couple of decision makers that were my leaders at Team Six just weren't seeing my genius. They were seeing it, right? I just didn't display to them, the things that they wanted to see. And it took me a little bit longer to earn the spots that I was wanting because of that, right? They saw me as distracted. They saw me as entitled, which I was. I earned that. And so these degrees were this colossal distractor, externally speaking. Like they saw me doing this and they're just like, why? Right? Like your job, like we live this job, man, and you're spending 3 or 4 hours a day and your whole weekends doing this, and it just wasn't it wasn't that they didn't appreciate the education. It's just this is the major leagues, right? And I was in an operators, an operational, excuse me, um, capacity working on these other things, which I did pull off. I would say and they would probably say I was above average and below amazing at my job, right? And that's really what my evaluation showed. I got promoted ahead of my peers, but once I hit a certain point, I was really hard to deal with. I got pretty full of myself by being promoted early a couple of times, and what made me very hard to deal with. And when it was time to go from team chief to troop chief, they told me I had not been selected to go to the next level. And that was pretty devastating, but in my heart I knew I had earned that. And nothing happened there that I did not earn. It just took me a lot of years, probably 4, to fully let that set in. And my journey really started in 2000 and late 2015 when they told me this. They're like, look, man, you're not tactically under question, you're not operationally under question, you're just too hard to deal with. And I mean, I told my officer in front of like, I don't know, 20 people that I had better things to do than whatever it was he was asking me one day.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm absolutely humiliated that I did that. And that was in front of a whole, our part of the task force. And even though I apologized to him about 3 minutes later, that bullet can't go back in the gun. And so I lost a great deal of his trust then. And my troop chief, I was working very hard to have him relieved because of what I thought. I just, man, it was just all ego, and it was all what I thought, right? And I honestly thought these things. That was the hard part, was I honestly thought them, and I wasn't trying to get his job for myself. I knew I wasn't qualified for that, but I wanted somebody else to do it that probably aligned more with what I wanted out of life. And so believe me, if I could get in a time machine, I would support him. I would have had his back and learned what it is that he needed me to do as a team leader underneath of his direction, and supported him. And further, I would have supported him to the group, which I also didn't do. And there was a lot of divisiveness within our group. Despite being very operationally sound, there was a lot of drama there, and I was a big part of that, which I can't go back in a time machine. And those were the absolute best leadership lessons I ever learned, was those leaders putting me in a place where I could really reflect on this. I call it getting put in team leader timeout. So I finished, and I got, I did what they call successfully completed, right? But they made notes as such that signals to the board that I need more development. And they were right about that.
What do you think you wanted from the situation that you weren't getting from your leaders at that time?
it was just my unwillingness to settle down and just realize like it's going to take longer for me than I thought. And I was rank wise very senior, but at the team I was very junior. I had only been there 2 or 3 years when I was really pushing hard to get a team leader job, which they didn't want to give to me because I had not been there long enough for that. But eventually they gave me a shot. And so once I got that, the troop chief changed out. And that's when the self-will and my judgments really, it didn't take long for me to start making judgments that things weren't going the way that I would have had them. And, I just was a part of dividing the group. I don't know that it was even willing. I think I had my heart in the right place, as one of my mentors at the boat team was saying, you have your heart in the right place, but your head's in your ass. And that's kind of how I feel about it now. Like I look back, and it's not like I was this evil mastermind trying to get something. I wasn't going to get richer. I wasn't going to get better position for myself. But I just made these decisions unilaterally that this wasn't good and I need to be the guy to change it. And the leaders at the time reminded me in no uncertain terms that that is not how this works. And it has changed my life on the outside. Like I've never gone back into that territory because it feels awful, right? Like there was a couple of supporters I had, but most were like, man, this is a lot of drama, Nate, and
Yeah.
they didn't want to be involved in it. And so, that was, it really wasn't a long period because I found out about it, I want to say like the later part of 2015 on my way out of the operational group. And they put me in a training slash experimental science role, which when you're not in an operational unit, you're either waiting to go back to one or you're waiting to go like to another place because you're not relevant to Team Six any longer. And that's where they put me.
Wow.
That's where I had earned, right? I joke with people. This was not what it was like, but they effectively put me in charge of a broom closet, you know, to help me see that I got work to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I did. I did that work.
Um, if you could go back in time and talk to yourself at that time in your life, what piece of advice would you give your younger self?
You don't know half of what you think you know. And hopefully I could frame this in a way that that guy would listen. Because right now I'm thinking just in this scenario, if I stepped out of my magic Bill and Ted's phone booth, I'd be like sitting there like, and what now? Like I see you have more gray in your beard and you have a shaved head, but you're still me, man. And I'm not picking up what you're laying down. But I would say you don't know what you think you know, and you're not as good as you think you are. So when they say you need more time, it's because they know better and you need more time.
Got you. Got you. So, so then a couple years go by and you're basically you're getting out of the military. And can you tell us a little bit about your transition and your life as you got out of the military?
Yeah, I mean, I made the decision to get out. More things that people did that I didn't like, and it was time. That's what I'll say. Even in these, I made that decision early 18, so 6 years ago, and I'm glad I made it. I'm really glad I made it. I don't know that I would have gone on this deep of a journey, right? And like I said, if I were to give this a title, right, if you gave me naming rights, I would call it the heroic journey of a non-hero, right? It's like I said, I didn't do anything to set myself apart from my peers. I don't have any massive awards. I didn't do any hero stuff in a mission. I didn't single-handedly charge a machine gun nest and save my team. I just didn't do that. And I served in an average way for the people I was with. And so when I started getting out, I had been put in a waiting line that was a little bit longer than I wanted it to be. But what I was really reflecting on to get a leadership part, but I had resurrected myself and I was going to get the role that I had been in. It took me 2 years to right the wrong from team leader timeout, which is not uncommon for people to have to do. And so I did do that, and I was offered a position that I was gunning for. And I just realized that I had not that I had gone to do all I did, but I think it was just time. And I wanted to go try this education thing. I was good at it, I got good grades. I thought a little differently than my peers in my MBA and in my diplomacy masters, but along their lines and like up to snuff, if you will, with those thinkers. And so I wanted to join the professional world where they were kind of on their, I use this metaphor loosely, like their front lines every day. And I wanted to do strategy. I wanted to see like my contribution to a higher level thinking that whether it's for a company or for an initiative or a project or whatever level I'm working at, I wanted a little more influence than I was having, let's say, on the Operation Enduring Freedom, or, at the time we were still doing mostly counterterrorism stuff. So I just, I started thinking on a bigger picture level, um, based on the education and some of the discussions I was having. From Cindy would connect me with these top level thinkers and strategy and stuff like that, and just have cool conversations. So I wanted to try that. And, there were a number of really great leaders that tried to talk me out of leaving 4 years before retirement out of the goodness of their heart. But I did the financial math on it. Um, having just gotten a fancy degree in that, I did the time value of money calculation. And from my calculation, based at, the interest rate that I want to earn on things, I I left on the table about $1.5 million.
Whoa.
So to me, it would just they offered me to all kinds of different roles, from the kind that were really engaging and really difficult all the way to things that needed to be done for the Navy at that rank, but not difficult, right? Whatever I wanted, they offered it to me. They really tried to keep me from getting out ahead of retirement, which I am very thankful for. But I decided to get out anyway. And because of the nature of all my injuries and stuff, I did get most of what I was going to get at 20 years. I got about 2/3 of the retirement I would have gotten. So that change to the calculations is the 1.5 million. But I didn't have a check for 1.5 million. That was 2,200 extra dollars per month for the rest of my life, assuming that I die at 85. And then I discounted it back at 9% and realized that I left about $1.5 million on the table.
Wow. Can you tell us like what kind of injuries were you leaving with?
Hmm. So I had my first back surgery when I was 27. Um, so riding those boats in those open seas, it was really hard on your back. Lifting heavy things in very awkward positions was very hard on my back. And our trainers at the time, and rightfully so, because they're experts on taking shock with your body, we did a lot of heavy Olympic lifts from the floor. But I had to have mine adjusted because of my back stuff. So a lot of knees, a lot of shoulders, and a lot of backs. It's kind of like roll the dice, and a guy's either got knees, shoulders, back, or maybe some even had mixtures. Mine was only back, right? I did dislocate a shoulder. Mostly sleeping though. Like my sleep, I have insomnia and sleep apnea, which is a thing that you may hear around, but the general populace of the United States has 22% of people have sleep apnea, and that's because oftentimes they're obese. This is the doctor's research, right? But in our community, it's like 80%, and almost none of us are obese.
Wow.
So they're still working that. I don't know if Duke University has concluded their study. I know they were doing one, but I have obstructive sleep apnea, likely from mild traumatic brain injury, I believe is what they've attributed it to. I also have insomnia, which comes in the form of hypervigilance. So I'm only in light sleep most of the time. So I wear one of those rings that does, keeps all my stuff. And I sleep light, sleep most of the night still. I've been working on that quite a lot, but I didn't have any of that until I went through Green Team and served, there. So I don't know what's specific about serving there. I would do it all over again, but the VA sees fit that sleep issues, along with arthritis in my back and a number of, I got shot with a gun. So, I got shot in the upper arm. And
Oh
so
wow.
it was a big rehab deal that got me a certain rating with the VA. And, I missed like 5 months of duty and
How'd
eight
you get how'd
surgeries.
you get shot? Are you allowed to say how you got
Yeah,
shot?
it wasn't even fun, man. I wish I could tell you that I stormed a machine gun nest or something, but I didn't. I got shot in a training accident. And so, yeah, and it feels exactly how you think it would. That's why this is what I'm serious about the non-hero thing, right? Like I even had the opportunity to get shot with a gun, and it wasn't from the enemy. It was in a training accident in the United States where a guy on my team just lost his situational awareness. And I'd like to say I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I wasn't. And, it was purely an accident. And, I spent 5 months convalescent, 8 surgeries, And everything's normal now, right? Like my arm's fine. I got a pretty cool scar to show for it. But yeah, I mean, all of that cobbles together to, get the retirement or most of it that I was entitled to at 20 years. And they asked me why I didn't medically retire. And this is like where this point where I just decided to get all, full of integrity was, I probably could have, I'm guessing, because based on these injuries and the sleep and all that stuff. But if I hadn't gotten out, I would have stayed operational. So to me, that doesn't really bid toward a guy who should be compensated like that, because a med retirement's a whole different deal. And the question, I think, if somebody walked up to me and was like, "Hey man, can you continue?" The answer would have been yes, I can continue. I just don't want to, right? I am ready to go. And the final test that I did was that when I leave an operational group, if I see them fly away to do a mission that what we would think is sexy, and I'm okay with that, then I'm where I need to be. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And it happened. They at least got alerted for an admission that I would have loved to be on. And I was just in the tail end of my service there, and I watched them fly away, and I was actually okay with it. Right. I
Yeah.
didn't feel like I was missing out. So it's nice to have done a few things in line with my integrity along the way. Because frankly, most of the things I did, other than like I didn't commit crimes or anything like that, but most of the things I did were not within the integrity that I have now.
Oh, really? Really? Can you give
I
an
just
example of that or
Sure, I wouldn't have bucked my leaders so much, right? I would have found out what they wanted from me and probably given it to them first and then asked for whatever things that I was trying to demand from them in the first place, right? Like they've I was just like I said, these are my words, not theirs, but I was very hard to deal with
yeah.
for them. And I can think of a few that I will be making amends to and not all that long. Um, officially, which I haven't done that yet, but I will be doing that. And I would just simply tell them I would have handled this entirely differently, knowing what I know now.
All right,
And
and you're able to get in contact with them?
sure, yeah, I still have their phone numbers, assuming they didn't get new phone numbers. So, and if they did, then I'll just ask a friend, and I'll probably go there, and do that. So this is me cleaning up my side of the street, right? So, because I hold my time at that team to in the highest regard. I don't have that place never did anything to me,
Yeah.
right? I served there, with honorably, and all of the stuff that, we may get into further, I created that. I created that consternation doing what I thought was the best, but I could have been a much better teammate to the leadership for sure.
So you mentioned possibly getting into some of the stuff that you created. Do you mean like once you got out that some of the stuff kind of stayed with you and maybe haunted you a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I had I misused alcohol since the time I was 14. And so now in recovery circles, they call it drinking alcoholically, right? I drank alcoholically since the first time I ever put alcohol in my mouth, which I was there squarely to get a buzz, if not drunk, right? And I did that for the first time when I was 14 years old. And I did that fairly regularly from the time that I was 14 years old until about 1 year ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was getting intoxicated until 3 years ago. I stopped drinking altogether. I don't put alcohol in my body any longer as a choice, right? Um, Starting a year ago.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, that's just best for me. There's a lot of people that can drink without trying to ruin their lives, but I apparently, in the long run, I'm not one of them.
So congratulations on that. Can you tell us a little bit about like what led up to the letting go of alcohol?
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings on rock bottoms is rock bottom isn't when you like bump into something. Rock bottom is when you stop digging. And what got me to stop digging was this, I just carried this sense of dis-ease all the time. I didn't know it was anxiety because I was kind of so cocky. I didn't know it was anxiety, I guess is a lack of a better term. I used to tell people like I don't have stress and I don't have anxiety, but I do, and I did. And I hit something of a rock bottom in May of 2021 where my dis-ease just overtook me, right? And I was a binge drinker. I drank to get drunk. No questions asked. Like I wasn't a cold beer on a hot summer day guy, right? I love that people can do that. I was if I had one beer, I needed enough to get me drunk type guy. That was just how I saw the world at the time. And I guess lucky for me, I kept it within a reasons that I wasn't out like risking my life or, I wasn't drinking on the job. I never drank on the job in any of the special operations stuff. And so, I had these tight containers that, I rode my dirt bike up and down the street one time and crashed it at 2 a.m. in the middle of like a suburban area. That was about as bad as it got. I got a DUI when I was first in the Navy, when I was still in the fleet. So I had these little stoplights along the way that were like, hey man, you probably shouldn't get drunk like this. I got in a fair amount of fights along the way, but never any that got me arrested. I typically didn't start anything like that. They just kind of happened and then they fizzled out and I'd, have a busted eye or something like that for a week or whatever. And it would just kind of go away. I'd broken ribs once from a fight I got into, but I was just every Friday or Saturday night or both for a lot of years, I was past driving intoxicated. And it was not uncommon for me to get blackout drunk. I mean, and when that happened, it was a roll of the dice whether I was fun loving guy or the like start a verbal problem with my mate, right? With my girlfriend or wife. It was roll of the dice. And I can't even give you a ratio, but it was not uncommon for me to have a bee in my bonnet, also drunk and be drunk. And so back in 2021, I did it I did it one too many times, and I did it at a law school graduation of my wife at the time, and in front of very respectable people. And so that was probably the 100th time I'd done it, not necessarily, it's at least the 50th time I've done it in that relationship. Bless her heart, right? She went through some stuff with me. And a friend of mine observed it, a friend that I served at the team with. I mean, she was there a long time. First name's Tori. And she sat me down. She's like, hey, you need help. You need help. And I said, for what? Like, she's like, yeah, yeah. From what I watched last night, what I know is that you do this all the time. What they know is that one incident. She's like, the 10 years I've known you, you've been doing this. Like, how much longer are you going to do this? It's like, well, real rich coming from you, knowing like our back history. And she's like, right. That's what I'm here to tell you about, dummy. Right. And that's how people are getting help. It's like, and I was so embarrassed because I knew I had done this by this point, right? I knew what I had done. And I'd done it a number of times and I was embarrassed every time. But this time I was ready to listen. And so she spoke in a way that was very loving and very much like, it's time to get help. And so I didn't know what that even meant, right? I didn't know binge drinking like that was like a long time problem. But Now that I'm sitting here, in those days, I couldn't imagine not drinking on a weekend. Unheard of. No way. Unless I was deployed, no way. No way I'm going a weekend without drinking. I had plenty of friends that didn't drink and I didn't see them. They'd invite me to do things and I was just like, maybe, right? What am I going to do at your lake house with you if you don't drink and I, go by myself or whatever? And so, no way. And so my friend laid it all out for me. And at the time, there were a number of veterans going to psychedelic therapy in Mexico. I mean, it's a household thing now. Like we just call it going to Mexico. Have you been to Mexico? Yeah, I've been to Mexico. Or, no, man, but I hear it's like life changing. What about it? Like, all right, well, I, after a little bit more conversation, I submitted, and 3 weeks later, I was in Mexico.
Wow. And what year was that you went on that retreat?
2021.
Got you. And what does that entail going to Mexico? What does that entail?
Yeah, it was an interesting one, right? And so I got there quickly, and I think some of the veterans in the wellness circle, of which I am one, we call it putting up a star flare, right? So I had told, as a result of this, I told my wife at the time that I was recently having suicidal thoughts. And so, which I had had a moment with my own gun, um, a couple of days before this meltdown, which I call my rock bottom. There's a couple of these rock bottoms, but that was a notable one. The meltdown in front of the respectable people 2 days later was a noticeable one. And then in December of that year, um, when I was in the jungle of Peru, doing ayahuasca therapy, that was the final rock bottom where I decided to fully stop digging. So, going back to the decision, like they called the psychologist I used to have when I was at the team. He called me and asked, it's probably time for us to consider, for you to consider medication, which I just wasn't willing to do. I was not willing to take happy pills or the whatever, the SSRIs. I just wasn't willing to do it. And so I told him I want to try this psychedelic therapy
I
before.
I just want to ask you real
Yeah.
quick. What can you tell what happened 2 days before the incident where you got
Yeah.
drunk at the party? What happened 2 days before that?
Yeah. So I used to go to these happy hours, full of, again, very respectable business types here in Houston. And sometimes I would overdo it and a few of us would follow on someplace else. And then sometimes I'd have my couple beers and go home. It just depended on what I was doing. And so that was one of the nights that I overdid it, and I'd always figured out the driving piece. Like I had this way of never like getting in trouble with the law, but still like living this life I didn't love. And so on the outside, everything looked awesome. I was at this awesome bank with this awesome team. I made more money than I'd ever made in a single year in my life, like 2.5 times what I was getting paid in the military. Everything from the outside, like my relationship seemed, that's a caveat, right? Seemed like the kind with problems, but doable, right? And we were moving to Texas for the opportunity. I was already there. She was finishing and joining. And but what I didn't know was this lurking monster below that was like, hey, fix this, man. Fix this. And so I'd gotten home that night and it was, it was this time of night was late. I don't remember what time I got home, but it was in the wee hours of the morning that I had this moment. And I used to, keep in Texas, it's just not uncommon to keep a gun near your bed, right? Really any state, but the kind you can actually have them. And I have a gun next to my bed, or did. And something kind of it, my experience was an interesting one because it wasn't this one of like, I can't take this anymore. the world is too hard kind of deal. It was almost some part of me challenging me, right? And so I actually picked it up and I put it to my head, and it was like, fix this. Some like feeling, some like inner dialogue, whatever it was like, fix this or pull the trigger.
Wow. So
And
that was 2 nights before you kind of got really rowdy in front of the
yeah,
friends of your wife and the graduation of your wife.
yeah, and I effectively cussed her out. I cussed her out in front of a lot of people over something pretty stupid, right? That I was wrong. I was fully wrong. It was not a misunderstanding. I was just fully wrong.
Yeah. And 2 days before that, literal no one even knew this, but you were holding your gun in your hand in the middle of the night, um, contemplating ending everything.
Mhm.
And thank God you didn't. I'm glad that you didn't. And so those two incidents led you to, I guess the VA psychologist said, "We'll prescribe you pills," and then you didn't want to do that, and so you ended up going on one of these veterans psychedelic retreats.
Yeah, this was actually the psychologist I had on active duty, right? And so he did me a solid and took the call from, my wife at the time used her channels, and it didn't take long for me to get a call from him. And I'm glad he did. Wonderful man. He's retired now. And he was with me a lot of the way after being shot and trying to, like, I was on pills and didn't know if I was going to come back to the team and all that. It's very uncertain when you're that level of injured. But that part was his service to me, and that time was absolutely wonderful. And so he called me back, right? And again, it wasn't like this, I got to get out of this and something saved me. It was more like a challenge to myself. It's almost like even my suicidal thoughts are egoic. It's like tough guy stuff, right? Like, dude, fix this or end it. But we can't live like this.
Right.
Despite, I was even, I don't know, everything on the outside, the scoreboard, my net worth, all that stuff was great. I just felt like hell. And I don't know what I was doing, and I didn't know why I was doing it. I was just doing it with a lot of vigor, right? I was trying to become a really good banker. I was trying to, be a good dad and do all the stuff, but it's like the harder I worked at it, the faster it would come, but it wasn't coming faster. And
Because so by this time you've been out of the military and now you're working in banking and you're just making great money.
Mhm.
You're crushing it in your career. Everything on the outside looks great.
Mhm.
But on the inside it's not working.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember being at a couple of those happy hours and looking around, and there were a couple of friends that I had there that might have been in the same state as me, where everything looks good, but we would have a few too many and really get into like connecting over the idiots around us, or like people that couldn't see how good we are at something, and no, 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 no. And not to be outdone, like all those guys are on the path now, right? They've done their own inner work in a very meaningful way, and it all started from me doing this thing and coming back. And I remember asking a few people, right? I was like, "Are you okay?" They're like, "No, man, not even close." Like,
Wow.
wow, and I asked a number of teammates this. Um, I have a teammate that's on a lot of podcasts, and I think he even has one of his own, DJ Shipley. And I remember asking him at a nonprofit event we were both at through a nonprofit that we is really near and dear to us, the Danny Dietz Foundation. And I asked him, I think in May of 21, it's like, "Hey man, are you doing okay?" And he's like, "No, not even close." And so he actually tells his story on Sean Ryan's show, which is pretty incredible. I think it's in 21. So he and I must have been going through parallel things in 21. Um, I
Yeah.
haven't listened to the podcast, but I know the story because he told it to me.
Yeah.
And so I've asked a number of friends that, like, it just seemed like was on the same wavelength as me. Like, "Are you okay?" And they're like, "Nope." And
Wow.
eventually we all had done the same modality, right? Like, it's in a number of us have been and done ibogaine therapy in Mexico, supported by one of these foundations. And I went to a group called the Mission Within. They are still operating in Mexico. And I got, I got some sponsorship from a nonprofit to go and do that. And so you asked me what that was all about. Like, I learned a number of things down there, but one of them is there's way more to this than you thought. I think that's what I got was like, oh, I remember going into one of the ceremonies and I thought I'm going to deal with my time stress, my stress around time. Oh man, we got to deal with way more than that, right? My time stress is going to be put up on the shelf and laughed at later compared to the things that I was fortunate enough to deal with head on. And ibogaine is also what I didn't know because I didn't know I was an alcoholic at the time, is also very good for addiction, right? It's very good for those who have addiction, who have PTSD, and who have MTBI, of which I have all of them.
Yeah.
So I I had a great dose of like, oh man. And for some reason, I mean, it must have been the coach I had. I have a great coach, had a great coach, goes by the name Moose. And I just stuck with it. So a lot of times you go to those, they're 4 days long, you get this amazing healing, this amazing food. Any of these retreats that say they do retreats are awesome. I've been to a number and I've supported a number as a space sitter for others as well. And there's a great one out of Austin called Heroic Path to Light. That's awesome. I've done in their predecessor. I sat with them a few times. And
Yeah.
so these things are super powerful and they allow you to see your things head on in a way that you've never considered it. And effectively, what it does is it puts your conscious and your unconscious in the same place. And you're able to deal with those things that are brewing down below in a way that you couldn't try to do without this modality. There's very few ways to do it. You can do it with breath work as well. So if those people that are just not for the using plant medicines or substances to get to that point, there are breath work modalities that you can use to get into a transpersonal state as well. You're just not there as long.
Got you.
But
Got you.
that's what I went through, and that's where I threw my metaphorical gun away, was in Mexico in June of 2021.
And was that on an ibogaine retreat?
Mhm.
Wow. That's amazing. So you got like a very big transformation out of it.
Mhm.
And can you say what group, like what was the like was it like a 501(c) that sends veterans, or can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that?
Yeah, there's a very good group name called VETS. It's capital V, capital E, capital T, capital S. It's an acronym, and I just can't remember it. I wouldn't do them any justice. Veterans Exploring Treatment or something like that. Wonderful group headed by a Navy SEAL and his wife. They offered to pay for it. I took payment from a nonprofit that wishes not to be named in this type of area, but I did get an offer from vets, and I do think that they are a great nonprofit to support in this space. They've got a very robust program since then, that I believe very deeply in.
And so you ended up basically like did you end up like weaning off of alcohol after this and like kind of like
Yeah.
the suicidal thoughts dissipated, or how
Mhm.
kind of can you elaborate on like the healing and transformation that occurred?
I can. The weaning off process was much longer than I thought. I would have bouts of not drinking. Um, so I got back, I might have made it 4 days, and then I had my two drinks. It's unheard of for a person that, you know, drinks alcoholically like I do, if I were to drink. I was able to do the 2 drink thing for a while. And then I was able to do the 3 drink thing for a while. And then I was able to do the 5 drink thing for a while. And then that was over about 3 months as it started teetering back up to what would get me buzzed
Mhm.
and therefore hungover and therefore depressed and anxious in the morning. But I stopped getting drunk for a period. And so I went in June to Mexico in June of 21. I had another retreat that I went to that, again, from the predecessor of Heroic Path to Light. which is the name of it now in Austin area. And that what the modality there was mushrooms and 5-MeO DMT. And that's where I got to scream until I had no voice and start dealing with, I think, what many people might call their demons. I got to start dealing with those. And so I I came out of there again. I think I didn't drink from there. That was October. I didn't drink for about 4 months. I started seeing, so my wife at the time and I just called it one day. It was like, this isn't good. And she was also on her own healing journey, right? She was doing very serious work on herself at the time. And you normally think that you would fix it, right? But she and I looked at each other one day and were like, this is over, isn't it? And she looks back and she said, it's been over a while. Yeah,
Wow.
you know? And she said, look, we've been pen pals for 3 years while I was in law school. And I just think you and I both know that's it for us, and so we agreed to it and we made all the right. It just wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing, and we are on extremely good terms now. We still co-parent. We have you know, we have wonderful discussions when we have them. And so that was a benefit of doing this work. We didn't have to get into this tit for tat. There were no faults there. None of that. She didn't do that. And luckily for me, I didn't decide to do that for myself either. And when I did, she'd actually correct me like, hey, man, you beating yourself up isn't helping at all, right? Like, we've still got a job to do with this boy. And so it didn't take long for her to start like, hey, we're moving past it, right? Like the it's over with. And so she's a wonderful, wonderful human. And so in October is when I realized like I'm a fighter. I just fought everything. And this is evidenced by the story from the team earlier, right? Just fighting everything to be the way that I want it to. And I learned that with this journey because it was trying to take me past my ego. And my ego wasn't letting me past. And so that's where you get to deal with things like that. And there was a wonderful set of people holding space for me and a therapist that sat with me for much. There were 13 other people or 12 other people there. I was one of 13. And these two people spent a lot of that time with me because I was having such a rough go. And which was in hindsight what I needed because it submitted me.
Mhm.
And so that was October. And then I wanted to start raising money for this. And I have a mild irritation with exclusion. Um, so I got all the funding in the world to do this, and I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful to all these groups. But I had a buddy from one of my happy hours, a Marine that was in the tough stuff, Ramadi, Fallujah, and there's no nonprofits for him. So I was trying to get him on the path. He was one of the guys that I asked if, are you okay? And he's like, at a happy hour. And he had had a few more than one should probably have at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. And he just was like, no, I'm not. It's like, okay,
Wow.
here's what I've been doing. And I laid it out and he's like, I will do that. And I was like, cool. Let me find out how we can get it paid for. And there was nothing. It's just nothing. I talked to the foundations that supported me and they're like, sorry, special operators only. I'm like, well, great.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
there's a number of nonprofits that only sponsor special operators. And so that's fine. That's in their charter, but I'm not judging that. But as just as a person, I get irritated by that kind of exclusion a little bit. I'm not a
Yeah.
crusader on it. I don't have anything beyond what we're talking about to say. But I had a friend that wanted the healing, has very deep combat stuff, lost dudes in Ramadi, lost dudes to suicide after, and wanted this healing and couldn't find it. So I called a group called Heroic Hearts. They're the third group that I will support them for a very long time, if not indefinitely.
Yeah, we had Jesse Gould on the podcast
Dude,
a
he's the
couple weeks
best.
ago.
He's
Yeah.
the best. Jesse's the absolute best. And
Yeah.
his group is the absolute best. Namely, if I had to choose a favorite, it's going to be Jared. And it's only because Jared sat with me as I went through hell in the jungle. So Jared was one of the space holders that I had. We haven't talked about the December journey that I went on to the jungles of Peru and to do ayahuasca. But yes, I think the absolute world of that group. So I went to them and they're like, hey, look, we've got quite a bottleneck going, as you can imagine, because we don't have exclusions. But, you know, tell them to put in a thing. There's a line. And that's the way it went. Well, apparently somebody came out and you still have to do like 3 weeks of prep for ayahuasca. And so they called me right at 3 weeks, I want to say, and they're like, hey, somebody just had to cancel for whatever reason. Can your friend go? And I was like, with 3 weeks notice, I don't know, maybe. And so I asked him, and I'll be damned, he went. He went. This was in September
Wow.
of 21. So he went. And he came back a very different person. We still have breakfast most Tuesdays. So
Oh, nice.
we used to connect over pain in our drinking days, and now we connect over wellness. And
Wow.
so we go to breakfast at this awesome diner in the financial district here in Houston. And, it's just a different kind of connection. So Heroic Hearts, I mean, just lined everything up just on a whim. And I'm sure they had called some other people on their wait list and we weren't able to do it. But he went to the point where I wanted to start helping raise money for them because at the time I'm a banker and I run in the circles that always want to donate money to a cause that they believe in.
Uh-huh.
And since then, I started meeting people in those more successful, more wealthy type of people that are using psychedelics as a modality. And so they would ask me, like, what's a great place to do my donations to, at least the part that I want to do for that. And, I'd point them in any of these three directions, depending on their own beliefs, right? And so I wanted to raise money for Heroic Hearts. I wanted to get more combat vets, any vet really, the any man. It didn't, to me, it didn't matter around combat. But I talked to Jesse, right? So Jesse and I did a call. I was like, how do I do this? I'm pretty sure I can help raise money in Texas, but how do we go about that? And he just pulled out all the stops. We came up with a strategy. He's like, oh, by the way, there's a journey in December that we have an extra slot for if you want to go. And I was like, sure, I'll go experience it. I mean, I don't have any work to do anymore, which is laughable. And so I went, and that was probably, I mean, all of them were very powerful, but that's when I decided to stop fighting, was when I went to Peru with Heroic Hearts. And I mean, it's 3 nights. Night one, I fought. It submitted me. I mean, I don't know anybody who has brothers or really good boyfriend man friends. They've probably fought until they can't lift their arms anymore, and that's what it felt like I did in the first 2 nights in the jungle. Is I fought until I couldn't lift my arms, in like a spiritual way. And I'll never forget the facilitator, the guy in charge. I can't remember what they're called, ayahuasquero or whatever it is. I wish I could remember. I feel stupid. But he came up to me and I'm losing my mind. And they had to put me in this shower and cool me down and losing it and started screaming, which is a thing I did when I fought. And he comes in and just as calm as this is like, it doesn't have to be like this. Just that calm. And for some reason, gone, done. I was like, okay. And and I stopped and he's like, you must get out of your head and into your heart. And I didn't know what that meant at the time, but it sounded like something I was willing to try because I was at the lowest point I think I had ever been at, despite all the work up to that point. This just took me a couple of layers deeper because I was finally ready to go to this point. The other two journeys kind of walked me into this. And, Jared sat with me for most of that night. And it was very powerful. And the next night, the leader said, "Okay, what are you feeling?" It's like, I don't have another fight in me. I just don't know why I would drink that again and fight again. It's like, okay, I got it. And that's his job. Like he knows like how to manage that. And it's amazing how well they know how to manage that. And he gave me what I needed, and I finally understood, at least intellectually, what it meant to get out of your head and into your heart. And that's what I left there with. And my moment from there, though, like from the powerful moment that I had actually came when my plane was landing 2 days after we, finished our last ceremony. My plane was landing in Houston from Lima, and I was watching the Matrix movies. And I watched two and three um, because I had read a book while I was in the jungle about non-duality, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And it had a chapter trying to explain non-duality, but from the point of view of the Matrix. So I was watching two and three, and there's a part at the end where they realized that the war wasn't necessary and they didn't have to start it in the first place. And to me, it was like, now I don't know whether I did have to go in my little internal war against myself and with myself. I did have to, but the part that I got was I was just so glad it was over. So it was when I realized that my internal war is over. And if you watch the Matrix movies with like a inner journey kind of lens, you'll see these types of things. And that's what I saw. And I just started ugly crying on, it was like 5 in the morning. The sun was just coming up, and these like Peruvian people were on either side of me in one of those like 5 row middle seats. And I was just like shoulder shrug crying, behind my two COVID masks that were required to be in Peru.
Oh, wow.
And these poor people must have just thought I was bonkers. But that big powerful moment was landing back in Houston. And I think that was also part of my not drinking for 4 months. And yeah, so I did one more journey. I had gone and helped hold space as, a person who's just been through it and a person to talk to if they need, right? I was sitting there, but quiet, and these things are called holding space. And at the end of everybody going through 5-MeO, I uh, I asked the facilitator if I could go because I had not done that modality of 5-MeO, which was the actual toad venom. And so I had done the plant-based one before, but not this one. And I don't know, it must have been curiosity, call it divine inspiration, but I tried it. And everybody that was staff there, all the participants had kind of gone to another area. They were working on their own stuff. And I sit down and there was like two people with me, and he went through the ceremony with me. And I remember my coach at the time saying, "Hey man, just go for broke." And I talked to him on the phone, and I didn't know what that meant. But right when I was doing the ceremony, I did. And this is an inhaled modality. So I inhaled that stuff from the bottom of my toes to the crown of my head. I mean, I was just done with this, done with it. And I got to go free, right? And so some people call it your unity moment, some people call it meeting God, going to the light, whatever. There's a lot of ways to explain it, but I went to everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was just, I can't explain it. It wasn't like a scene that I could explain again, but I stopped fighting. There was no fight, there was no anything there. There was just pure energy or something. I don't know, but I came back to my body, and I remember looking at one oak branch that was kind of waving in the wind. We were outside, and I felt at one with that, and I never seen anything like it. And it was on your average everyday Texas oak tree. But when I looked to the sides of me, every staff member was sitting on the side of me. Let's see if I can tell this without crying. Um, they were all there, and they all know exactly where I went. Because when you come back, you have this smile that feels like it's going to break your ears off if you smile any bigger. And these guys were all just sitting there kind of on their haunches, on their cushions, and they know exactly where I went. And those of them who knew me knew how much I had just put down, in that moment. And so the facilitator knew where I went. It was so great.
Wow.
And but to have them all there sitting with me in that moment, because I'd done all of these ceremonies up to this point with without coming to this point, right? I never got anywhere near this level of power. And mostly it was fight. And then I was happy the fight was over when, the plant medicine wore off. And then I would meditate it into my daily life and things like that called integration. But this thing was, oof, some people call it the God molecule, right? The bufo, the actual bufo. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not qualified to call it that or not, but I got to be loaned those moments of heaven. I
Wow.
think I think the universe loaned that to me. And I never felt that again using psychedelics. In fact, I stopped using them in those types of doses right after that.
Hmm.
I did one more journey with the same facilitator, and I just kept hearing when I was in there, you got everything you need, man. Now you got to go live it. The answer's not in here. You know everything that you need to know. A couple months later, I went and did one more, a little bit different ceremony, but it was about a 4 hour deal. And he was just there. Like he gave me a safe place and all of that. I went with the person I'm currently married to. And it was just a way for me to hear, like, hey man, we say now, like, get the message, hang up the phone. And so that was the time I hung the phone up and I got it. I changed coaches from an integration coach to a transformational coach. And, it was time to start building the stairs, out of that, that spot.
And so it sounds like that's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of this. That's really personal. It's a really personal journey, but thank you for sharing it. And so now you're alcohol free and the sort of like the internal battle seems to be over. Um, I want to talk about the integration and where your life went after the journey, but I have to ask you one question because in the middle of your story you mentioned a book. And I'm just curious if you remember the title because I'm like,
Mhm.
holy shit, that must have been a fucking amazing book.
Yeah.
The non-duality book that was like about through the reference of the Matrix. Do you remember what book
Mhm.
that was?
I think it was called The Essentials of Non-Duality. I think the last name of the author is Cohen.
Okay.
We can correspond on the backside. Like if you look it up and like, is it this? I'm like, yeah, it's that. But what it is it's non-duality through the lens of every major religion. So Christianity, Judaism, Muslim, and all seven major religions and how they view non-duality. And at the time, with just where I was, I couldn't get it. I thought it was a stupid book and it was uninteresting. I just didn't get it. But when I just flipped to the table of contents real quick and it said like non-duality according to the Matrix or something, I'm like, no, okay. And I went to it and at least intellectually it clicked.
Yeah.
Well, I've been studying and trying to embody non-duality since then. That was my first experience with non-duality or even hearing the term. But now I live relatively in a non-dual world, but it didn't dawn on me until several months ago when one of my clients just kept saying good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, and just telling me how his week was going. And in non-duality, it's there is no good, there isn't bad, there's just experience, which is pretty deep, kind of woo-woo for those who don't like to
Yeah.
go so deep. But I realized that I've been living in some version of non-duality just because it caused me to notice, like, what do you mean bad? Right? Like bad. And and I was quiet. I just noticed from my own journey in that moment. So I think it was called The Essentials of Non-Duality.
I gotta check that out, and I feel like we could go for like an hour on that topic because I just had like a bunch of questions spring up from you talking about that. But I do also want to talk about sort of your post plant medicine journeys. And so did you transition out of working at the bank? I know you mentioned that you have some clients now. So can
Mhm.
you talk about like what are you doing now? And so you were in the military, then you were in banking,
Yeah.
and then you kind of went down this path, and now what are you doing?
Yeah. So I was a private banker, right? So at a big bank here in Houston. And then I I started with a transformational coach in June of 2022. His name is Sean Hansen. Wonderful transformational coach, next level. And I was suffering with my work life, nothing that the bank didn't do or did do, it's a fine place. But I wanted something, I didn't know what it was, and my performance was average at for there. I had a great year. I was one of the better people in my like experience level, and then the next year was pretty flat or below average. So that averaged to average in a multi-year area. But I took a job at a smaller investments firm to do a very specific thing. Made that agreement with the CEO. But what made me go was I was already wanting to become a transformational coach. So I had started my training in it. I was pretty well into the swing of transformation myself with Sean. And so I was just working it. Sean and I did a call every Tuesday and Thursday for 90 minutes for a year. So, and that was based on my desire to do more work, right? The cadence is up to the client, but I, made a deal with Sean that he has a certain price range for that level of service. And so I was really into the work. And so when I called the CEO of the new company, he was trying to bring me over and it was going to be at quite a big pay cut. And so head to head, only benefit was I had more freedom. But then I realized like my goal is to at least have a side hustle as a coach. So I went to him and I said, "Hey, look, I'll come over there at the level that you want to pay if I can coach too." He's like, "I don't care about that. That's just you just have to tell that FINRA that, right? Like the
What exactly is a transformational coach?
yeah. So I help people transform from their current state into whatever it is that they see as a goal. And some just know they don't want to be here anymore, but I don't know what's over here. That is also transformation. So what I found in my own journey was what I call my gift, right? And my gift, I've worked on this. It sounds quite rehearsed because I finally worked on it in a way that's very conversational, but I deeply understand the human experience and I help people accomplish goals that they didn't know they had. Or I help people accomplish goals that they know they have, but they have no clue how to start. They have no clue how to go toward. That's what transformational coaching is to me, from something into something. And so it's major.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, other types of coaches work at a level that is like business coaching. It's very specific around business. Life coaching is how to get back in the gym. It's I don't want to call it light because it all matters, so but my stuff, we go deep. And there's a saying that we have in the coaching industry that says you can only take clients as deep as you're willing to go. And I've been all the way. I have been all the way to hell and then all the way to heaven, just like Dante's Inferno. And I'm here to serve others now in that journey because I've taken the entire thing all the way through.
Mhm. And when you found your transformational coach, w- what were you working on? Or were you just ready to get out of the state you had been in and find something new? Or did you have specific goals that you were working on when you found your coach?
Yeah, I had we we had very distinct goals, right? And I set them. So when we do transformational work, it's called letting the client lead. And so the client comes up with objectives and key results, just like in a regular business project. What are the objectives? What are the results that you want to get as that show that you've actually achieved the objective? So mine were, I want to be a much more open person as evidenced by, right? And so you had a thing where it was, you had evidence to show what you want to see in the future. So I want to be a much more open person as evidenced by my willingness to go to more sports events with, my wife, because sports are really important to her. And so that was really, really helpful for me to go through because I set the trajectory, and I'm actually trying to find my OKRs right now.
What is that? What is an OKR?
Your objectives and key results.
Got you.
But yeah, so we got together. I took an assessment, that showed kind of how I'm seeing the world at that moment. And and then we kind of that's what he worked off of from there was where I wanted to get. And that's also, the same thing that I do as well is I call it putting your destination in the GPS, right? So if we go into a car, you and I get in a car, Jeff, and we're not going to say, okay, where we go? You get in there and you say, okay, where are we going, Nate? And it's like, I don't know, north. Right. Well, what do you mean north? Right? Like, where are we staying? We going to Dallas? Where are we going to stay when we're there? What's the weather? What do I wear? So on and so forth. So these key results are really important part of it. And so mine, I've actually got up here. I want to be a much more open person. And then the second part is as evidenced by no longer resisting so many things, as evidenced by others that I have known a long time in mentioning my openness, as evidenced by increasing experiences that I would never to have agreed to before this. And then my next OKR or my next objective was I want to be a much gentler person, as evidenced by keeping my tone, volume, and harsh words down. And as evidenced by not just limiting harshness, but by significantly increasing my loving, accepting tones, nonverbal cues, etc. And the last result of that particular one, as evidenced by my willingness to reach out to others and see how I can help them without judgment. My last objective was I want to be significantly more in tune with how energy flows, as evidenced by increased positive occurrences in and around me, as
Oh,
evidenced by
wow.
more quiet, pure bliss moments and greater success in my endeavors. And so the punchline there is that I set those in June of 2022. And they're here.
So between the plant medicine retreats and the transformational coach, you've achieved these things that you just listed.
Yes,
And that inspired you to kind of move on from the bank and facilitate this work for other people and become a transformational coach in your own right.
that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
So, I nowadays I meet my clients mostly in professional circles, right? If you go to our website, I look like, any type of coach there. And I operate like that too. I mean, I do business coaching. I do some of that on I just did an engagement with a bigger financial corporation as I help facilitate one of their major meetings every quarter, and I did a speaking engagement for their sales force effectively. So I do some what I call straight stick professional coaching, right? Professional executive coaching but I also do this one-on-one transformational stuff, which can go to childhood, it can go to trauma, it can go to a host of different places. But normally I get the clients that have tried therapy and it didn't resonate with them in the way that they were hoping. I think every one of my clients has been to therapy in some way, and it just didn't resonate with them.
Do you guys, and you may not be able to answer this, so if you can't, just tell me, but is a lot of this work in conjunction with plant medicine as well, like for your clients? And some of that may be confidential, but maybe just broadly
Sure.
speaking.
Yeah, so I don't really do that. I have helped them it's very common for them to have done it on
Hmm.
their own,
Yeah.
right? One of my clients heard a podcast that was very powerful to him, and they had put the link to the group that he used overseas, or outside the US in the chat, and he
Yeah.
clicked it and went.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when he got back, he needed help integrating, and he's a client of mine. But um, there are some clients that I have that we would just won't talk about it because it's not important to their journey.
Yeah.
And I don't bring it up
Yeah.
to all of my clients. And most of them get powerful work. Some of them have chosen to do it, and they do that. But it's kind of up to them, right? If I tell my story just like I told you, but like I had a client for a while that I just generally speaking don't think it would have been appropriate to mention it to, so I don't.
Yeah. Got you. Got you.
In my own use.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Got you. So this is Can You Survive This podcast? I feel like I'd love to have you back to talk about like non-duality and like even more coaching stuff.
Oh yeah.
Um, so maybe we'll have to set that up. But in the time we have left,
Mhm.
I want to see if we can do a transformational coaching based hypothetical survival scenario.
Okay.
All right, so let's give it a shot. And usually, for people listening at home, usually we're doing like hypothetical plane crashes and all this stuff. But I thought it would be cool to do like a coaching one since you are the expert in the coaching realm. So I'll give you some A or B questions and you can tell me how you think you would handle the situation.
Mhm.
All right. So for this scenario, you are a transformational coach guiding someone through a transformative journey. You're about to start the coaching relationship. Do you A, begin with a detailed assessment of their current life situation, or B, jump right into setting ambitious goals?
I think this goes back to letting the client lead. Um, I would actually, so it's the first one. We do an assessment. We do a 2 hour, what I call discovery call, where they do lay it out, but I also coach them. So in that session, they do most of the talking. I do mostly question asking, right? That's what most people don't know about coaching is that it's not a lot of talking. It is definitely not advice giving. And so, there's ethics with it. You mentioned being an ICF certified coach. Yep. Right. And that's what it takes is that's the governing body, if you will, on ethics to make sure that we are letting the client lead. So typically the first probably 3 sessions is simply getting to know one another and getting to know the problem.
Got you. Got you. All right. Thank you for the answer. Moving right along, after the initial assessment, you find out that the client is struggling with time management and lacks a clear sense of purpose.
Mhm.
To address this, do you A, work together on creating a daily schedule that aligns with their goals, or B, dive deep into exploring their values and passions?
Whichever one that they want.
Okay.
If they've landed with me, most of my business comes word of mouth. And, if anybody resonates with the story that I've told here, chances are it's deep.
Hmm.
But I have done discovery calls with people that are like, whoa, that's deep, man. Like, I just want to learn how to like communicate a little bit better. And so I have the range to do that. But normally I had a client that did 3 months with me, and I do year-long deals that are billed quarterly. And he's like, look, thank you. I didn't know we were going to go deep. And I'm glad we did, but I think I'm as deep as we're going to go. And so we just decided to, end it there. So I would let them lead, right? And so it may help to do what we call tactical coaching to help them with time management right off the bat to get some wins,
Hmm.
right? We may want to get some wins together. We don't need to go all the way back to, a trauma situation unless they want to, right? I don't lead them anywhere. I just ask a lot of open-ended questions, but in the normal getting to know you, we definitely want to get some wins early because the big shifts happen a little bit further down the line.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. Next question. The client expresses a desire for a more positive mindset and resilience in the face of challenges. So, do you A, recommend daily affirmations and gratitude practices, or B, encourage them to take on a new physical challenge to build mental toughness?
A,
A?
unequivocally A. Yeah. And so I'm actually, this is a really well asked question. There are three things that this work requires. I don't know another way. I'm sure that there are, but the way that I know, the way that I went through, the way that Sean guided me, and the way that somebody guided Sean, like this is a lot of coaches guiding, from one to the next to the next. There are three things that it requires, and they're along the lines of answer A. One, learning. You have to learn from the outside, whether that's reading books, whether that's listening to these podcasts, whether that's watching YouTube videos. There's amazing videos on YouTube. There's a channel called Eternalized that is next level. It's with an S, right? Eternalized with an S. And there's great podcasts, right? They're just like this one, right? And so whatever you learn, you have to learn from the outside. The second one is meditation. Now, I know most people, if I walked into a boardroom and said, by the end of this, you're going to meditate every day, they're like, all right, weirdo, right? Unless they've been trying to do that, right? But once we get everything figured out, I'm like, how are we going to stay connected to what you want to get done? If we're having our meetings every week or every other week in a lot of cases, how are you going to stay connected to your journey? The only way to do that I know of is meditation. And it's as easy as 10 minutes a day, and you don't have to know how to do it. Meditation is this simple. You sit in a quiet place. I meditate in a chair. I don't sit in the lotus position. That's not comfortable for me. The point of meditation is to sit in a comfortable position that you will not fall asleep, right? So whether you use transcendental meditation, metta meditation, or any of these other modalities, you need to be in a position where you won't fall asleep. And so that's thing one. Thing two is your mind will get carried away and you use something to bring you back. The most popular is the breath. I actually prefer to hold stones in my hands. I don't like messing with my breath, but my clients can meditate however they want. Some do Deepak Chopra's guided meditations. Others do nothing, right? They just sit by themselves. But meditation is this: your mind goes out and then it comes back to presence for a few seconds, and then it's going to take you out again. Just like life. Life gets you carried away in obligations, in your work, in your kids have soccer, car just broke down. Now we're down to one car. We both have jobs, busy, busy, busy. So that will take you away. And then you come back to whatever your center is, right? And this is agnostic of method. It's just we figure out what works for you on that. And if you do 10 minutes a day in the beginning every other day, that's better than 0 minutes a day. Right. And so it took me probably a year to get on to where I meditated every single day because it was punctuated with hangovers. But I mean, all BS aside. So the second one is meditation and the third is discussion. So learning, meditation, and discussion. So sessions where you actually discuss what's going on, right? Like where is it coming from? A lot of times it's feelings, right? Just like the good old therapy. You got to talk about those because most Americans aren't willing to talk about those. Anything other than anger and excitement, right? Otherwise, they don't talk about it. So we're mostly in our heads in America, but what we're trying to do is get people into their hearts. Just like my boy when I was in Peru, right? I still hadn't left my head yet. So those are the three things. Everything else is I do custom, right? So everything I do with a client is custom. I have some clients that we do mostly voice recordings with each other because I have a client that's a very successful, he invests his own family money and he is traveling a lot. So he doesn't like to do his sessions over the phone. He prefers to do them in person. So he and I exchange voice memos so he doesn't have to set a time for a call while he's traveling, things like that. So we'll exchange 2 to 3 voice recordings maybe every other day. And so verbal processing is really important. Go from your processing where you hear out of your own mouth into your own ears is really important. It's different than your thoughts spinning in your head. So that is why the discourse piece. So we learn so we want to bring things in that I don't know, right? Because I'm going to bring my knowledge in the discourse. But we may read together or we may read something that the client likes the idea of. We may listen to a podcast, watch a video. Again, modality doesn't matter to me as long as it's learning. Meditation keeps you connected. It keeps your wheels on the rails of your journey every day. And then the third, we go deeper with discussion.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Thank you for sharing this. One thing I'll add before the next question, because I'm a big advocate of meditation as well. And I like how you explained, like, it's kind of like whatever works for you. There's like an agnostic part to that.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to share for me, what I do is when I'm sitting and my brain starts to go out, what the technique that I use, and I don't know if it's easy for people or hard for people, but what I do is I just simply don't add more thoughts to the thoughts that start to happen automatically. And that seems to work for me.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to add that. Next question, though, we got a few more to go. We're almost to the end here. As part of the coaching process, the client faces a setback in achieving their goals and feels discouraged. Do you A, reevaluate and adjust the goals together, or B, focus on building resilience and coping strategies for setbacks?
It's closer to B and with some caveats. Oftentimes, and especially when we're doing work for a year or longer, you're going to go through the same trouble at least twice. And it feels like you're going through the exact same thing again. But I once had somebody explain this to me that it seems like you're going in a circle, right? But if you're looking from the top, it looks like a circle. But if you look from the side, it looks like a spring. So you could have gone 3 levels higher in energy in the way you see the world, the lens at which you see the world. And from the top, it looks like you're just going in circles. So I think it's important to know that setbacks are a part of this. Whether if you're dealing with work stress and another big project lands on your desk and you handle it what feels like the exact same way, um, is probably different 3 or 4 months in or 6 months into a transformational coaching relationship. And typically, the problems are deeper than that, right? I help people a lot with either home life or work life. Very, very seldom is it both.
That,
So,
that's an amazing analogy with the spring too. It looks like a circle and it feels like we're going in circles, but really it's like a spring. So we're kind of actually working our way
yeah,
up. We're spiraling up.
yeah. So imagine it this way. Like if I get a person and they're in victim energy, right? Which is the lowest form of energy. And it's common. It's the most common layer of energy. When stressed, we go to victimhood. And if I get an angry person the second time around, that's a level up. right? When you're angry, you're willing to do something about it. That's a massive move. When I get an angry person, I'm so happy, right? Like, I'm sick of the way this person's treating me. I da 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 da. Like, that's way better than resign. That's way better than apathy. So I can work with that. And then the next step higher than that is cooperation. Like, still hate that guy, still think he's out to get me, still think he's victimizing me, but I gotta, like, hey, I got a job to do. The company needs me, the military needs me, whatever the group is. That's what we call cooperation, and that's the third level of energy, right? So as person goes along, this might be every quarter. If they've gotten to cooperation, then that's a noticeable change.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, this is really good insight. Thank you. All right, couple more. The coaching relationship has been going well, and the client is making progress. However, they want to explore deeper aspects of personal growth.
Mhm.
Do you A, introduce mindfulness and meditation practices, or B, suggest taking on a new learning challenge to stimulate personal growth?
Um, we probably are already doing mindfulness and meditation, right? That's kind of thing one. So I don't want to cop out and say a little of both because it's a lot of both. It's a lot of both.
Mhm.
But meditation is something we talk about not day one because that's overwhelming, especially for a person who's never even considered it. It's woo-woo weirdo stuff, it's statue of Buddha kind of stuff. I get it because I felt that way the first time that somebody suggested me to meditate. But, I was taught to meditate in 2016 and didn't learn how to do it in a meaningful way until, much later, 22 probably. And 2021 when I'd started it, but I learned the methods of it somewhere along the way. But what typically when you let the client lead, they're trying to get through a problem. And so that typically takes a deeper look on what's blocking you. We use what we call energy blocks. There are four. Limiting beliefs are stories that society has told you, right? Such as men don't cry, men don't show emotion. You just knuckle down, you get the job done. You don't give your feelings about it, right? Limiting beliefs. Interpretations are incomplete information, right? So typically, if we've got some of the information, we fill in the rest, and it probably isn't to the credit of the person that we're dealing with. The third is assumptions. Assumptions are um, because something happened once or twice or whatever in the past, it's going to happen that way forever. That's one of the major energy blocks, and these are from the lowest level of influence over your life to the highest. So we're at assumptions, and then the last one is inner demons. Inner demon is the deepest one. It's the hardest to come to grips with, and that is some version of I'm not good enough, right? So my inner demon, my version of I'm not good enough is I'm full of shit. And typically it's me calling myself full of shit. So it's like, you're full of shit, right? Like, who am I to get up in front of these 80 financial advisors and tell them how to be their best selves, right? It's this self-doubt, I'm not good enough thing. So that's typically what we're dealing with. And the best thing to do is figure out how to go deep enough to where we identify which block we're working with, and then how are we going to release it? But first we got to know about it. And
Mhm.
so the answer B there is very important. We would use them in concert with each other. Oftentimes breakthroughs happen between sessions in meditations.
Yeah.
There were meditations I'd have where I ugly snot bubbles cried, and my wife now would be watching me and not knowing what to do. And thankfully, she just left me alone to take care of myself, because that's what I was doing is for once I had myself, right? Like I was there from I had gone through the inner child, right? And that's the issue that I was having when I was crying the snot bubbles is I was letting my inner child know that, hey, I've got you, man, And
Mhm.
so those are typically the deeper things that people can deal with if they want. And so we use the go down to the energy blocks and we just investigate it until it clicks. The
Mhm.
click is the aha moment or what we call an energy shift. And once they have that, I don't release anything. I just take them in there and we circle that thing until their big aha comes conversationally. And oftentimes it happens in a meditation between sessions.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, two questions left. The client expresses a fear of failure and is hesitant to step out of their comfort zone. Do you A, break down their fears into manageable steps, or B, share stories of successful individuals who faced similar fears?
First, I would do A. I don't want to patronize them.
Hmm.
So they have a number of friends already in their life that tell them, why don't you just dot, 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 dot. And what people don't realize is when you solve their problems, you take their ability to take care of themselves away from them. It kind of insults them subconsciously, usually,
Well
right? If
said.
you got a big problem and you bring it to like a trusted group and they're like, hey man, why don't you just, and they're just like flick it off like, no, 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 I'm up at night with this, man. What do you mean? Why don't I just? And they mean that by the best. So I don't want to join those ranks when I'm coaching somebody. So what we do is again, we go down to the what could be the block and we just circle that thing. And then we may go away from it if they can't find it. And what I do is I call it guiding through the snow globe. So if me and the client are in the middle of a snow globe and we're really shaking that thing up, I might bring past I'm not good enough in the scenario and they see it go by, but they don't know how it pertains. And then we might bring across, you know, another piece of the scenario. It's like, well, why don't you act if you know? And I'll bring it by. And sometimes I might bring I'm not good enough across at this angle. And then they find like, oh, now I get it. So we call it arcing, right? And so what they'll be like, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm rambling about my mechanic when my problem is why can't I just listen to my wife when she has a problem instead of solving it? And in fact, those two things do relate. We just have to find out how. And I don't know how. I'm not a soothsayer, but I can bring like, so what does this have to do with your kid's teacher? What does this have to do with? Well, I told, and then the aha happens. Now, it may be in the session, it may be in a meditation between, but kind of shaking that thing up and getting everything moving in front of them and hearing their own words back to themselves is different than ruminating on a problem over and over alone.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Fascinating. This is very insightful. Okay, last question. The coaching journey is reaching its conclusion, and the client has achieved significant personal growth. Do you A, celebrate their accomplishments and set new long term goals, or B, reflect on the lessons learned and discuss strategies for maintaining progress?
Yeah. Normally when they've reached that, it's B, right? We're like, hey, we're 3 months in. What's different? Okay, we're 6 months in, and you've noticeably changed how? And I let them say. Sometimes they'll ask me, and I really try not to answer because that's judgment. They don't need judgment from me. That's why I do most of my coaching calls on the phone because I don't want them to see my acceptance or not. And we always look for micro expressions and things that show. They ask me all the time, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Like, look, we've determined that you are a healthy normal, right? That you don't need actual psychological help, that you're a healthy normal. So if you're speaking in this session, it makes sense, right? But I don't, so I like to show them, well, it's been 6 months. How is things different? Oh, it's way different. I'm much more patient with my wife. I've even started to setting a plan to serve her, you know, in ways that I would never have thought before, kind of examples. And I just let them tell me how things are different, even though I know how, right? Um, it doesn't help for them to hear that. Sometimes they'll put the metaphorical gun to my ribs and be like, tell me. And I'm like, look, you're doing the work. You're doing the work. I can see that you're doing the work. And I try to give them as little accolades as possible because I deal with high achievers.
Mhm.
I deal with high performers. And so that's the important part there is like they need to lead themselves. That's the whole point of this is for them to learn to rely completely on themselves.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this insight. I feel like I've learned a lot. I would love to have you back to talk about, do like a whole other podcast about like spirituality, non-duality, more about coaching.
Mhm.
But I know we have a little bit of a time limit. So do you want to share like where can people find you, website,
Yeah.
Instagram, if they want more information, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. The company I um, work for, my wife owns, which is a whole funny story, is Level 7 High Performance. And my Instagram is Nate underscore the underscore coach. So I put Instagram material up every single day, normally just one line readers or a minute long video. I know people won't watch for much longer than that. But I'm also on LinkedIn. If you just look up Nathan Reeve, you'll find me. There's probably a couple, but I'm the only transformational coach named Nathan Reeve. So I'm easy to find. And I'd love to talk to anybody. It's about conversation, right? I don't prospect people. I talk to them. And I talk to a number of people for months before they get to decide to have a coaching relationship. And many of them talk to me and we don't because they're not ready. So I'd love to talk to anybody.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. And yeah, we'll have to connect later. Maybe you come back and we'll do a whole nother one about spirituality and stuff.
I would love to do that. So consider me in, just hit me after this and we'll set it up.
Amazing. Thanks so much again for coming on and bye everyone.